We are entering peak dynasty season, and that means there's a lot of value to be had, whether it's buying low on players that are undervalued in the community or selling high on players that are overvalued. We're going to give you 3 players to buy low on and 3 players to sell high on. So that being said, Dak, who's our first buy low?
First, buy low. I've talked about this in other videos, the importance of buying these old running backs that have 1 to 2 year windows, but are going to produce incredibly well. And I'm going to talk about Alvin Kamara right here. Right now on Keep Trade Cut, last time I checked, he's running back 26. And the guys in front of him, you're looking at like Charbonnet, Jalen Warren, Ramondre Stevenson. They're not producing the way that Alvin Kamara is. I personally have him at RB18, but it doesn't even really matter my ranking. The point is he's going to produce a ton this year. And if you're a contender, this is specifically talking to contenders. You want Alvin Kamara on your team. Last season, coming off his suspension, he averaged 18 points per game. He had 8 weeks where he was the RB1. He missed 3 games to start the year, and he was still RB11 by the time the year was over. He is an elite producer. And part of that is because of the amount he catches the football. He had 75 catches last season. Nothing in that offense has really changed. Derek Carr is coming back as a quarterback. They haven't brought in any receivers to like take targets away from him, and they just love using Kamara. It's always been that way since he's gotten in New Orleans. Like if you want to contend this year, he's the perfect guy to get on your team because nobody thinks he's any good. They think he's old, whatever. So you can exploit that. You can pay a mid to late second if a guy owns Alvin Kamara and get him on your team, and he's going to become a hammer for your team. He's going to get the volume, he's going to get all that work, and he's going to average probably 16 to 18 points per game, just like he did last season. And he's really undervalued. Just like a late second round pick, what is that doing for you if you're picking that, making that pick in a rookie draft? Like that's going to be some day 2 running back that might be a backup his first year. Why not just invest that in Alvin Kamara and you're going to get those points and that's going to help you win a championship this season. I'm all in on buying Alvin Kamara if I'm a contender and just sending a mid to late second round pick, getting that done. Dalton, who is your buy?
Yeah, I love the cheap upside with Kamara. My buy, now I need to preface this with tight end premium only. You can still do it in non-tight end premium, but it definitely does not have the same impact as a tight end premium. It's going to be Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram was tight end 2 last year. 2. He was insane. Had 18.6 points per game. That's a hammer. That's a
Yeah.
hammer player on your roster. If you have a wide receiver that scores 18.6 points per game, you're thinking of them as a stud. Evan Ingram's Evan Ingram. No one cares. But Evan Ingram is a sneaky hammer. He's an absolute beast. Right now in Keep Trade Cut, he's tight end 13. That is crazy. He's only 29 years old, so he's not that old. And tight ends play a lot longer than other positions, so he's completely fine. The target competition in Jacksonville only got better for him with Calvin Ridley leaving. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars definitely could add another wide receiver, but no wide receiver that they get in the first round or second round is going to be better than Calvin Ridley was last year. So you can still project Evan Ingram to get the same amount of targets, maybe even more next year. And that's what he feasted on. He had so many receptions last year. He was just an absolute stud. Right now on Keep Try Cut, he's behind someone like George Kittle, who's older than him and had 3 less points per game last year. Now, George Kittle is definitely the bigger name and the bigger offense, but I'll take Evan Ingram, honestly. So if you can send Kittle for Ingram plus, I would do that all day. Other players that are over him, I'll keep dry cut, are Javonte Williams, Christian Kirk. Are you serious right now? Javonte Williams, he sucks. He's going to average what? Probably 10 points a game next year if he's lucky. And Ingram's going to give you 18. It's a slam dunk. Right now, I would trade in terms of picks the 205 I just sent for him personally in a tight end premium league. I would send all the way up to like the 203 for him. I would be more than happy with that. Maybe even like the 201. I'd be happy with that too. One more thing to talk about with Evan Ingram right now, and it's with all tight ends. On Sleeper, if you're in tight end premium league, the little points per game thing that's in their profile is wrong. It projects it as if it's not a tight end premium league. And you can take advantage of that. Like right now in our league, Evan Ingram has 13.5 points per game, is what it says. He had 18.6 if you actually do the numbers. So when people have these players, they're not as in tune as we are with the dynasty landscape, and they check and they go, oh, we only had 13 points per game. I'll trade him. That's no big deal. Really, he had 18. So go take advantage of that while you can. It's not scummy. It's a good, smart move. Dak, who you guys are next by?
Yeah, so the next spot, I'm looking to target Bryce Young right now and keep short cut. He is the quarterback 20, which is right about where we have him, but people might not value him the way that we value him. I'll get to that in a minute, but first, just the rundown on Bryce Young. He only averaged 10.6 points per game last year. He was on a terrible Carolina offense, just had really no weapons to throw to aside from Adam Thielen. It was just a terrible situation that he got drafted into. The reason, though, I am more optimistic on Bryce Young is first the draft capital. He was the number 1 overall pick. He was taken ahead of CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, guys that looked pretty good in their first year. So he's definitely got that talent coming out of Alabama. They brought in Dave Canales as the coach. He revived Baker Mayfield's career. We've talked about that in other videos. So he's a great coach. I trust him to fix Bryce Young. They've also invested in that offensive line, which was awful last year. They brought in Deontay Johnson. So now you're looking at Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen as weapons to throw to. So it's much better than last year. He also ran for 250 yards. So there was a solid rushing floor. Maybe he can do even better this next season. Yeah, the talent's really there. And I think this next year, you're going to see a much better Bryce Young than you saw his rookie year. In terms of what I would send for him, it all really depends on your league format. Like in a 12-team superflex, 6-point passing touchdown, quarterbacks are very scarce, and it's so important to have that QB2 solidified. I would send probably like the 110, the 112, maybe even the 109. Those receivers that you're getting, like the Adonai Mitchells, the Lad McConkeys, they're solid. Like they're good talents, but they're not doing what Bryce Young will do for you if he hits in year two, which I think there's a decent chance that he could. You want to bet on that talent, especially if you can afford it. If you have those late first round picks, I would do that immediately. I really like Bryce Young. I think he can turn it around. And other people might not value him that way. They might go, Bryce Young had a bad rookie year. I'll just cut bait. I'll take an early second. If anyone is thinking that way, you exploit that immediately because you understand the league format, how important quarterbacks are, and you understand that he has the talent. But like I said, I would send up to the 110 for Bryce Young. I think he's a good buy right now.
I think Bryce Young's a player that, if I had to pick a couple players that could triple their value next season, Bryce Young's probably the pick at quarterback because he is not that valuable right now, but we could easily see him being worth 3 firsts next year if he hits like we think he could have last year. So
Yeah.
I like that pick. So we're getting to the sells, and my first sell is gonna be Jackson Smith and Jigba. JSN is currently wide receiver 26 on Keep Trade Cut. The big selling point with JSN is that there are still JSN truthers out there that believe he is the next coming of Jesus Christ himself, that think he's going to be a top end wide receiver one in his career. And I just don't really see that happening. There's a lot of things holding JSN back, and his talent might be good. He did have some phenomenal seasons in college, particularly that one year where he went for like 1,600 yards and had some crazy games with a crazy good room of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson there too. But now in the NFL, he's with DK Metcalf, he's with Tyler Lockett for 2 more years, and he has Geno Smith throwing him the ball. That's just not a recipe for good wide receiver production in fantasy. Last year, he was wide receiver 48 as a rookie, which is not good, and averaged 8.8 points per game. That is not something to write home about. That leads us more to believe that he's just another guy. Maybe in his career he might post a low-end wide receiver 2 finish or two, probably more likely to be a wide receiver 3 type player, and that's just not what we want when you can still sell him for like the 108. I'll take the 108 over him all day. You're getting much better talent there, getting much better players there. Just look for your league. I almost guarantee you there's someone in your league that values JSN like they did last year when he was the 105 in rookie drafts, 106 in rookie drafts. So go sell Jackson Smith and Jigba. Dak, who's your sell?
Yeah, so my sell, he's kind of in the same tier on Keep Trade Cut as JSN is right now, is Jaden Reed. Right now on Keep Trade Cut, he's wide receiver 28. He was the wide receiver 25 last year, scoring 13.5 points per game, but a lot of that was buoyed by the amount of touchdowns he scored. He had 10 last season, which is a lot. I don't think that's going to happen again because touchdowns are very fluctuant. Scoring touchdowns one season doesn't mean it's going to be there again. That could go down to 4. So I think a lot of those numbers were dependent on those touchdowns. He had very comparable numbers to Josh Downs in terms of targets, catches, yards, everything like that. And the main difference between those two is the amount of touchdowns they scored. Josh Downs had like 2 or 3, and Reed had 10. And because of that, they're valued incredibly different, even though they're really similar players. This is not a Josh Downs thing, obviously, but just talking about Jaden Reed. Another thing about Reed is the room that he's in. He's with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs in that wide receiver room. I think personally that Christian Watson is a better talent. Obviously, it hasn't played out due to injuries and that type of thing. But I just doubt that Jaden Reed has wide receiver 1 talent like an alpha in a room. I think they would always bring in someone to replace Reed as that alpha. I don't think he's ever going to get there. I think this is kind of his ceiling. Maybe he puts on like a couple extra 100 yards. I don't think he has the upside. He only had more than 5 targets 3 times in a game. He only had one 100-yard game. Like all his points were really off of touchdowns. So looking at who I would sell him for, when I was doing research for this video, there was a lot of people that thought he was equal or better than George Pickens. We have George Pickens up like a couple tiers more towards like the early 20s. So if you could get Pickens plus or do Pickens straight up, I would do that right away. I would also sell him for guys like Mike Evans and Devontae Adams, who are hammers if you're looking to contend and you want those guys on your team as opposed to Jaden Reed, he's not going to score as many points as those guys. Another thing I would look for doing with Jaden Reed, if I can re-roll Jaden Reed and get like the 109, 110, I would target those late first round picks, the guys that are going to be there, the Adonai Mitchells, the Lad McConkeys. Um, I think they have better talent than Jaden Reed does really at this point, and I think one of them, maybe two of them, will get first round draft capital. You're going to get receivers for first round draft capital in those late picks. So I would re-roll on Jaden Reed. I'd like at this point they're probably the same amount of talent, and they're being valued differently. So I would do that right away. Dalton, who is your sell?
So the last sell of the video is going to be Marquise Brown. So Marquise Brown just got signed by the Chiefs, and that's a huge place to go, obviously, for any wide receiver. You get the Mahomes effect. Do we really care though? No, because Marquise Brown is just a guy. His whole career, Marquise Brown has only ever had one season over 800 yards. It was a 1,000-yard season, but it was barely 1,000 yards, and every other season he's had has been very mid. He also didn't get a very good contract. The contract was $7 million base. That's nothing special for a wide receiver at all. And it's $11 million with incentives, which is also less than MVS had last year, which really is all you need to know about how the Chiefs view Marquise Brown. He probably just going to be a field stretcher. Maybe he catches a couple of deep balls and, has a couple big boom weeks, but nothing special, nothing consistent. He's already the third option in that offense with Kelsey still being a stud, and Rashee Rice is just better than him at this point. He's going to have more targets than him. Rashee Rice is just better. And we could see the Chiefs drafting a receiver, whether it be in the first or second round this year, that could be better than Marquise Brown or even eat into his targets as the wide receiver too. If I have Marquise Brown, I would go to people in my league and I would try to sell them on this dream of a fast, long ball receiver in this Mahomes-led offense. Well, do they know Mahomes hasn't thrown the ball deep in a couple of years? It's gone down every year, his ADOT. Now, Marquise Brown might, maybe it's a couple deep balls, but he's not going to be an every down, chuck it deep to Marquise Brown. It's just not going to happen. He's going to be a field stretcher. So I'm trying to sell them on that. Some people will probably buy into that. On Keep Trade Cut right now, he's near guys like Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, who all have a much higher upside and ceiling this year. They could all be 18 point per game players, and I wouldn't bat an eye. Whereas Marquise Brown might crack 12 if he's lucky. So I would move Marquise Brown for any of those guys if you're contending, or other young players. If you can add a second to him and get like a George Pickens, I would do that in a heartbeat. Or if I could get any first for him, you're not going to get any 24 firsts, but if you can move him for a 25 first, a 26 first for players who don't value that 26 class yet because it's so far away, I would do that too. It's going to help you out in the long run. So that's all we got for you today. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.